I want to start with something that a lot of people think privately, but rarely say out loud. You're tired, not just at the end of a long day. Tired in a way that's been sitting with you for weeks, maybe longer. A tiredness that sleep doesn't fully fix. That coffee helps for an hour and then doesn't. That makes you wonder whether this is just what life feels like now, whether this level of exhaustion is simply the new normal. And here's the belief I want to challenge today. Most people over 50 who feel persistently tired assume the fatigue is just aging, that the body is winding down. That low energy is an expected, inevitable feature of this chapter of life, that there isn't much to be done about it beyond rest, acceptance, and pacing yourself. The National Institute on Aging's research tells a very different story. Fatigue can be the first sign that something is wrong in your body, not something catastrophic, not necessarily something serious, but something specific, something identifiable, that has a name and often a treatment. And the people who accept persistent tiredness as simply aging may be living with a correctable condition for years without ever knowing it. Today we're going to change that, because persistent fatigue after 50 deserves investigation, not acceptance. And understanding what's driving yours, or the tiredness of someone you love, is the first step toward actually feeling better. Stay with me, because there's a specific connection toward the end of today's video that I think will surprise most people. It involves the emotional dimension of fatigue, and it's one that the research addresses with unusual honesty. Let's start with what fatigue actually is, because not all tiredness is the same, and understanding the distinction helps you figure out which category you're in. The National Institute on Aging defines fatigue as a feeling of weariness, tiredness, or lack of energy. It can be a normal response to physical exertion, emotional stress, poor sleep, or boredom. In these cases, rest and addressing the contributing factor typically restores energy. This is ordinary fatigue. It's universal. It's not concerning on its own. What becomes concerning is fatigue that persists for multiple weeks without relief. Fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. Fatigue that interferes with daily functioning, with doing the things you want and need to do. This is the pattern the NIA identifies as warranting medical attention. Not alarm, not emergency, but a conversation with a healthcare provider who can help determine what's causing it. The reason that distinction matters is that persistent fatigue is frequently a signal, sometimes the earliest and most obvious signal, of an underlying condition that can be diagnosed and treated. Missing that signal and attributing it instead to aging means potentially living with something avoidable for far longer than necessary. Let's walk through the medical causes of fatigue that the NIA identifies. And I want to do this not to generate alarm, but to demonstrate how wide the field of possibility is, and therefore how many potentially addressable causes are worth considering. Chronic diseases are among the most common causes of persistent fatigue in older adults. Diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, thyroid disease, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease all produce fatigue as a consistent feature. In many of these cases, better management of the underlying condition reduces fatigue significantly. Thyroid disease deserves particular mention here. An underactive thyroid, a condition called hypothyroidism, produces fatigue that can be profound, along with other symptoms like weight gain, cold sensitivity, and cognitive slowing. It's common. It's diagnosable with a simple blood test, and it's highly treatable. Yet many people attribute thyroid-related exhaustion to aging for years before it's identified. Anemia, a shortage of red blood cells or hemoglobin that reduces the blood's ability to carry oxygen, is another common and frequently undertreated cause of fatigue. Feeling consistently breathless, weak, or exhausted with relatively minor exertion can be anemia expressing itself. Again, diagnosable and often treatable. Sleep apnea, a condition in which breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep, disrupts sleep architecture so severely that people with untreated sleep apnea may sleep 7 or 8 hours and wake feeling completely unrefreshed. Many people with sleep apnea have no idea they have it because the disruption happens while they're asleep. If you regularly wake unrefreshed, snore significantly, or have been told you stop breathing at night, This is worth discussing with your doctor. Medications, as we've discussed throughout this series in many different contexts, are a significant and frequently overlooked cause of fatigue in older adults. Antidepressants, antihistamines, medications for nausea and pain, and many other commonly prescribed and over-the-counter drugs can cause fatigue as a side effect. The more medications a person takes, the more complex the potential for fatigue-inducing interactions. A medication review focused specifically on fatigue is a productive clinical conversation to have. Now let's address something that the NIA raises with unusual directness, and that I think most health content for older adults doesn't handle honestly enough. Emotional exhaustion is real. It is physiologically real. It produces fatigue that is just as genuine, just as debilitating, and just as worthy of attention as fatigue produced by a physical illness. The NIA lists anxiety, depression, grief from loss of family or friends, stress from financial or personal problems, and the feeling of having lost control over one's life as documented contributors to fatigue. Not as psychological weakness, as specific, well-documented pathways through which emotional experience produces physical exhaustion. This matters for the specific emotional landscape of later life. The losses that can accumulate in this chapter, loss of a spouse, of close friends, of physical capabilities, of professional identity after retirement, of the independence that defined a lifetime. These are real losses. They carry real grief. And grief is exhausting in ways that are biological, not merely emotional. Depression deserves special attention here. It is one of the most underdiagnosed conditions in older adults, partly because it often presents differently than people expect, not always as profound sadness, but frequently as fatigue, withdrawal, loss of interest in activities, and cognitive slowing. Fatigue that has no clear physical explanation may be depression expressing itself primarily through energy rather than mood. And depression is treatable. Therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, the tools exist, they work, and too many older adults are living with treatable depression without ever receiving that treatment. The NIA recommends talking with a doctor if mental health seems to be affecting sleep or making you tired. I want to underscore that recommendation, not because mental health concerns are more important than physical ones, but because they are just as important and just as often missed. We're now at the section I've been building toward, and I want you to stay for this, because everything I've covered so far, the medical causes, the emotional contributors, the medication connections, is important. But there's an insight in the NIA's guidance that I think most people receive backwards. It involves the relationship between physical activity and fatigue. Here is the belief most tired people operate from. I'm too tired to exercise. Once I have more energy, I'll be more active. And here is what the research actually shows. For many people, the fatigue comes first, and the inactivity follows. And then the inactivity deepens the fatigue, which reduces activity further, which deepens the fatigue more. The NIA's guidance is specific. Regular exercise can help boost your energy levels. Moderate exercise may improve appetite, energy, and overall outlook. Some people find that exercises combining balance and breathing, like Tai Chi or yoga, specifically improve their energy. This is not a suggestion to push through exhaustion recklessly. It is a recognition that the body's energy system responds to demand. Muscles that are used regularly become more efficient at producing energy. Cardiovascular fitness improves the body's ability to deliver oxygen to tissues. Sleep quality, which directly affects daytime energy, is consistently improved by regular physical activity. The entry point doesn't have to be dramatic. A short walk, gentle movement, starting significantly below what feels like it should be challenging. The NIA recommends that almost anyone at any age can do some type of physical activity, and that the appropriate starting point is determined in conversation with a healthcare provider, not by comparison to what was possible at 40. The key insight is this: waiting for energy before becoming active may mean waiting indefinitely. Introducing modest, regular movement is often what creates the energy, not what requires it. Let's also spend a moment on the lifestyle factors that the NIA identifies as contributors to fatigue, because some of them are things people don't immediately connect to their tiredness. Caffeine is one. Most people know that caffeine in the evening disrupts sleep. But the relationship between caffeine and fatigue is more complex than simply timing. Heavy caffeine used throughout the day can mask fatigue that the body actually needs to address through rest, create a dependency that produces fatigue when caffeine wears off, and interfere with sleep quality even when the last cup was early in the afternoon. Reducing overall caffeine intake, not just cutting the evening cup, sometimes reveals that a layer of fatigue was caffeine cycle related. Alcohol is another that deserves direct attention. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. It may feel relaxing initially, it may even seem to help with sleep onset, but it consistently disrupts sleep architecture, particularly the deeper, more restorative stages of sleep. A person who drinks regularly in the evening may technically sleep enough hours but wake unrefreshed because the quality of that sleep has been compromised. And the NIA notes that alcohol interacts negatively with many medications that older adults commonly take. Boredom is listed explicitly as a lifestyle cause of fatigue. And I want to pause on that because it's an insight that carries real weight. If you were busy during your working years, if your days had structure, purpose, social engagement, and a sense of contribution, the shift to retirement or reduced activity can leave a gap that is more exhausting than the busyness was. Purposelessness is genuinely tiring. The absence of meaningful engagement depletes energy in ways that don't resolve with rest. The NIA's suggestion is direct: engage in social and productive activities that you enjoy. Volunteering, community involvement, pursuits that provide structure and meaning. This is not optional wellness advice. It is a specific response to a specific cause of fatigue that responds to engagement, not rest. Let's bring everything together with practical actions. The first is to take persistent fatigue seriously as medical information, and bring it to your doctor if it has lasted several weeks with no relief. Don't accept it as simply aging without investigation. Ask specifically, what could be causing this? Could it be anemia, thyroid function, sleep apnea, a medication side effect, or depression? Ask for blood work. Ask for a sleep assessment if relevant. Give your doctor the complete picture of your sleep, your energy patterns, your emotional state, and your full medication list. The second is to keep a fatigue diary for 1 to 2 weeks before that appointment. Note when you feel most and least tired throughout the day, what you've eaten, how much you've slept, whether there are emotional or environmental patterns. The NIA specifically recommends this tool. It transforms a vague complaint of tiredness into structured information that a healthcare provider can actually work with. The third is to introduce modest, regular physical activity, not as something you do when you have energy, but as something that builds energy over time. Start smaller than feels necessary. A 10-minute walk is a beginning. Consistency matters more than intensity, especially at the start. If you're unsure what's appropriate given your current health, ask your doctor before starting. The fourth is to audit caffeine and alcohol honestly, not to eliminate either necessarily, but to understand their actual effect on your sleep quality and your daily energy. A 2-week reduction, less caffeine overall, no alcohol in the evening, will tell you more than any general advice about whether these are contributing factors for you specifically. And the fifth is to take the emotional dimension of your fatigue as seriously as the physical one. If you are grieving, if you are lonely, if you are depressed, if retirement has left a gap in purpose and structure that rest cannot fill, these are real contributors to real fatigue. They deserve real responses. A conversation with your doctor about mental health, a therapist if depression or anxiety is present, community engagement, social connection, and meaningful activity as genuine energy-building practices. Here's what I want you to carry with you from today. Persistent fatigue is not the price of getting older. It is information. It is your body or your emotional life communicating that something needs attention. And in most cases, that something has a name and a response and a path toward feeling genuinely better. The people who live with the most energy and vitality in later life are not people who escaped fatigue by luck. They are people who took their tiredness seriously enough to investigate it, who found the causes, addressed what was addressable, and built the habits that support energy rather than deplete it. You deserve that level of attention to your own well-being, not as an indulgence, as a foundation. Because everything else you want to do, being present for the people you love, staying independent, remaining engaged with life, is built on having enough energy to show up for it. That energy is more available to you than persistent fatigue makes it feel right now. Don't accept the exhaustion. Investigate it. Before you go, here's something I want to plant for our next conversation. We've talked today about the physical and emotional causes of fatigue. But there's a dimension of energy management in later life that almost no one talks about clearly, and that connects directly to everything we've covered in this series about sleep, nutrition, activity, and brain health. It involves the specific way that chronic low-grade stress, the kind that doesn't feel dramatic, the kind that just sits in the background of daily life, depletes energy at a physiological level. The mechanisms are specific, the research is clear, and the strategies that actually address this kind of stress are different from the ones most people try. That's coming next. And if you want to keep getting honest, research-grounded, practical guidance on aging with energy and clarity, subscribe to this channel. Take very good care of yourself. You deserve to feel well. And with the right information, that is far more possible than you may currently believe.